We're going to dive into how all of this stuff that we've already gone over relates to not just the modifications, but your sequencing as well. Now, there are so many different ways to sequence a class, and there are a lot of different highly beneficial ways. But the way that we're going to look at sequencing within the adaptive asana method is for the purposes of helping you design diverse sequences, progressive sequences that gradually invite your students and prepare them so then all these things become possible in their practice. Now, I know that feeling of wanting to offer a sequence that is really exciting for people, and it's creative and it's fun and it's this. Now, there are so many elements when it comes to sequencing and planning a class, but I'm going to focus specifically on the asana component of your class in order to be able to deliver something that is naturally engaging for your students. It is naturally creative, and when I'm saying naturally, it's because it's being fueled by all of this stuff. It's being fueled by the adaptive asana method in terms of how you can have these meaningful modifications, your impactful cues, and this sequencing that is very purposeful. Now, sometimes we can get really carried away with creating sequences that have so many different elements in them, or we see something that's really cool and we want to try it out. And sometimes we feel this pressure to constantly entertain our students, and it can become overstimulating for them. Now, I understand that desire to want to have variety and to not have a sequence that's boring, that your students are bored by or that you're bored by. But the very first thing that I encourage you to ask yourself when you go to create a sequence and why you might be sequencing in a certain way is exactly that. Why? Why am I putting something into my sequence here? So if we're looking at the outcome of having a sequence that is creative, that is engaging, that is informative, that is empowering, that's transformational, that hits all these points, we really always need to come back to looking at why. And all of these things will help your sequence be that, as opposed to, oh, I'm bored or my students are bored, or oh, I just want to add more variety. Really take time to reflect and look at why that is. What is informing your sequence? And this leads me in to looking at what we often do in sequencing, which is adding filler. So if your sequence is more filler than it is purposeful, progressive, accessible, adaptable sequencing, then you want to make some changes so that it's not so much a filler. Why? Because the filler is generally there as exactly that, to just fill the gaps. But when we go through all this kind of adaptive asana method sequencing tips, you will see that you really don't need that much filler. Now, I'm referring to filler as it not really having a great amount of purpose. And I have my filler that I do. I have my crutches where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to put this in now because that's a go-to thing, and it's probably not going to be harmful, but it also is just for the purposes of filling a gap, as opposed to what I have found to be the most beneficial, where the majority of your sequence is highly purposeful because you've looked at why you're putting it in and how it's helping your students create that transformative experience for themselves. And the more that you can put purposeful things in your sequence and kind of step away as much as you can from adding too much filler, the more you're going to be able to empower your students to really truly practice, move on their mat from a place of practicing, not performing. So always look at your intention when you're creating your sequencing. What is your why? Why are you adding things in? Why are you choosing to not add things? Is it from that place of I just don't want my students to be bored and I want to engage them and I want it to be fun and I want it to be creative and I want it to be entertaining? Or it's going to be all of those things when you utilize this approach that we're going to go through in the next few videos to be able to create a sequence that is progressive, that is purposeful, that is adaptable, that does encourage personalization and customization, it will naturally be engaging for people. It would naturally be creative. It will naturally be diverse, and it will naturally have so much variety in it.